Welcome back to the Something's Wrong Here podcast. We have a full house tonight. We've got two guests, and I am Randy.
And I am Brian.
I'm Kenzie.
I'm Aaron.
And for those of you that can count, that's only four of us. So we have a guest that is going to be patching in via the internet. His name is John Kelly, and he's an ultra runner and a data scientist. If you don't know anything about him, you may have seen him maybe on a few podcasts, the Tosh Show, Single Track, or Run Ultra UK. If you haven't, that's okay. He'll be joining us shortly to tell us all about himself and his amazing journey. If you Google the race with the least finishers, your first result will be the Barkley. It's a marathon, and since its inception in 1986, only 20 people have finished this race.
Yep.
That's 38 years, 20 finishers.
Yep.
John is one of only two people who has finished this race three times. Three times. And like we said, 20 people, he's one that's finished it three times. So he's a pretty amazing guy, somebody that Brian brought up to us and really was wanting to talk to, and we've been blessed and lucky enough to actually get him on here and have a chat with us. So, before we bring John in, kind of explain the Barkley, Brian.
All right, I'm going to correct you. It's the Barkley Marathons. Barkley Marathons. Okay.
Thons.
I really quick, I just as a tangent to kind of ingratiate and integrate Aaron's presence into the room.
Oh, yep. Sorry.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No.
Aaron's here with us too.
Well, the story. This is the story. This is my friend Aaron Axmere. He's a local Lee Summit guy. I've known him for, well, not local necessarily, natively.
Right.
It's Iowa boy. Iowa boy natively.
Yeah, native by way of Iowa.
Aaron and I have known each other for 20 plus years now. He's old balls too, man. I was not quite so old side. God damn it. But Aaron and I, we met playing pool. Met playing competitive pool, and Aaron's a hell of a player, and we're both very, very, very competitive. So we for many years just like,
who beats who?
Oh, he's got the advantage overall. I've taken a few from him over time.
Sure,
I've taken a few, just like I've taken a few from Boyce over time. But he's saying he's got me in the. It's a net negative for me.
I've never been a strong swimmer, but I'm decent at billiards.
Oh yeah. Yeah, good luck, man. You better bring a lunch if you're going to try to beat him.
I said decent, not good.
I'm not good anymore either.
We don't say that. We can still play. You're not gonna make any.
Now I will say, if we all have some fun and we just have some beers and there's no money involved and it's just friendly, then I think we'd all take some from each other probably.
Yeah. I don't play for money anymore.
Yeah. In any case, so Aaron's very competitive. It's also one of those guys that kind of anything he does, he ends up being good at. He ends up being pretty good at, and at one point, another friend of ours was interested in running for distance. Like, he was just kind of a thing he was doing, and he ran a marathon. And I want to think, man, I'd been running for a couple of years at that point. But I mean, I'd lost a bunch of weight, and it helped me, get healthy. But we started chatting one day about running, and he is like, "Hey, you gotta check this shit out, man. Barkley Marathons. You gotta see this." And of course, this was before there wasn't as many YouTube rabbit holes to go down with the Barkleys at the time. Right. But it was something that kind of caught in my ear, and so I'll give you a quick rundown. The Barkley Marathons, you said it was 87. It's mid 80s.
86.
Yeah, 86. It's a race that is run by a man named Lazarus Lake is his name. It's kind of a pen name, I suppose. You may have the notes what his real name is.
I know his last name's Cantrell.
Yeah. Gary or Jerry, I think. And Gary
Cantrell.
So the Barkleys takes place in Frozen Head State Park in Tennessee. Okay, it is 5 laps, 5 turned loops. Yeah, correct. 5 loops. Better term. 5 loops, and it's called the Barkley Marathons. I really think it's because each loop consists of around 20 miles.
It's interesting because I think that's just a rough approximation that they guarantee it's more than now.
It is.
Based off of what I've seen.
I think maybe if they like shot around, it would be around 20 miles. But I think if any person like John maybe can corroborate this tonight, I think he'll say that the laps are closer to 26 miles a pop. You have 60 hours to finish the race. They've kind of changed up the way that you do it each year. For instance, the last year I paid attention to one of these documentaries. They were doing a clockwise,
then counter,
clockwise, counter, and then whoever the first person to go off in the last loop got to pick the direction he wanted to go, and then it would alternate from there, each person that started the fifth loop.
If there are multiple.
Yeah, if there are multiple. I know
some years there weren't even anybody
some years nobody finishes.
Yeah.
And I think John's won one time.
He has a solo finish.
He's won one time, and I think he was the only person, the only person to finish that year. Weather can be a real detriment at the Barclays.
Absolutely. Have you guys ever been through that area of Tennessee?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
I drove through a couple years ago and remember seeing the sign for Frozen Head State Park and kind of looking off into the mountains and being like, already knowing about this race and thinking to myself, holy shit.
How'd you like to be scaling a mountain at night in this shit?
Because you can't see much. You just see these rolling treetops that are packed together.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is I think it's not like any other trail race that exists. There's certainly no marked trail. I think it's just a set of like waypoints, guide
You
points.
get a map, a GPS, and a location of books.
It's difficult to. I guess I struggle because that sounds like an adventure race.
Oh, it's like a scavenger hunt through the woods.
I get marathons is in the name.
You see guys with
you have an
climbing poles, walking poles. They use anything they can anything they can do to get. So when you get your bib, you have a number on your bib, and at every checkpoint you hit, there's a book. There's a book that's in a Ziploc bag, and you have to pull out the page that matches your bib number. And every time you make a loop, Lazarus Lake will look at your pages, make sure you've got all the pages.
I believe there's between 9 and 11 that he sets out each loop.
And then he gives you a new bib, and you go and start on the next lap. As Randy said before, only 20 unique people have ever finished this race. John has finished it 3 times. Jared Campbell has finished it 4 times. Jared Campbell's the top finisher. Words. My words really don't do justice to what this race is. In fact, it reminds me of what Scott called the MR340. It's the meat grinder. I mean, it is the meat grinder. So another thing that's unique about the race is that about a month in advance when it's going to go. He sends out a month in advance the invitations.
No, he does not.
Oh.
He sends a letter of condolence.
It's an apology letter.
It's an apology letter.
I'm sorry you have been accepted.
You have to write an essay to get in.
To participate in the Barkley Marathons. And all you know is that you want to show up, just before midnight on whatever the day, 12:01 on the day that he says it's going to happen. And you get a 1-hour warning when he blows on the conch shell. So he could blow it at 12:30 a.m., could blow it at 11:59 a.m. But you get an hour. You get an hour warning with the conch, and when Lazarus lights his cigarette, you go off.
There's no gun. There's no explosion. There's no ready, set, go. It's just silently lights a cigarette, and everybody takes off running.
It's also the weirdest start too, because there's only 40, so it's like a 15-second, that's it. There you go.
There you go. Boom, they're gone.
See him in a week.
And
2.5 days.
Yeah, and instead of 2.5 days, and what I want to talk. I want to ask John about this too, but just last year is pretty significant. Last year, the first female finisher finished the Barclays, and she was Jasmine Paris, and she finished with about a minute to spare.
36 seconds to be exact.
And it's
that seems to be argued because it's showing that she finished with like a minute and a half, and that there's a discrepancy in that. I'll argue that.
The
very, very, very
point
close.
is, man, made it by the hair on somebody's ass, and that's all that counts, man. And she's a finisher, and that's a fucking huge deal.
Yeah,
she's actually the first woman to enter the 5th loop.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I think was she into the 4th loop the year before? I
believe so. And I know she made the fun run at least once. I was reading through some of the old for fun run means you've made 3 loops. You've completed 3 loops.
It doesn't sound very fun.
And well, so it's crazy. Think about it. I mean, honestly, if you could walk at a normal pace,
about 3 miles per hour.
Right.
You walk 3 miles an hour. 12 hours multiplied. Take 10 hours, right?
Yeah.
10 hours. 5 loops, 50 miles. That means 50. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. 5 loops. So you'd think that you could even rest.
Yep.
But that doesn't happen.
No, all you have to do is average less than 2 miles per hour pace to get to finish a loop.
One thing you haven't touched on is exactly how much elevation gain this race guarantees, which is 2 Everests.
I believe it is 2 Everests, but if the funny fact is
60,000
that it's like at the end, if you make it, it's a net zero. Yeah. It's a net zero.
Gain and descent.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've ran 1 ultra marathon, and the up is hard, but the down kills you. Your toes drive into the end of your shoes for hours on end, and your quads blow up, and there's so little you can do, I feel like, to prepare for that discomfort.
When you say ultra marathon, how far was your race that you ran?
In order to be counted as a finisher, you had to run 103 miles.
Holy shit.
I did not finish. I tapped out at 65 at 19 and a half hours, and
that's still impressive.
I ran that many hours last month total.
And
I may have got there the last 3 years.
104.5 miles.
That was my one and only ultra marathon attempt. So.
Oh, why not, man?
It was
so much fun.
It was so much fun.
Want to go
it
back?
was so much fun. Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
at just 65 miles, what did your feet look like afterwards?
So my feet actually looked fine, which was crazy because I did expect blisters and all of those types of things but I didn't have any. But for the next 2 weeks after the race, my feet looked like double the size. They filled with fluid. I had to wear compression socks. I was constantly wrapping them with like a TheraBand to try to push the fluid back out of them. No shoes I owned fit. And
sign me up. That sounds great, man.
Thank God for sandals.
Brandon has lots of shoes.
Yeah. You do.
Yeah. You do have lots. You have way more shoes than any person should have.
So
I mean,
a male should have.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
It was the Barkley, actually, the documentary in 2012. That's the Barkley Marathons, the race that eats its young, which I think if anybody's at least Googled and looked for it, that's probably their exposure to the Barkleys. That was what got me wanting to try an ultra and potentially maybe someday attempt the Barkley.
Like I looked into it and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna check this out, and then it turned into this deep dive. Like, holy shit, this is amazing that people are doing this.
Yeah.
And when we say it's a marathon, it is up and down hills, like we said, 2 Mount Everest worth. It is through briar patches. It is through thorn bushes. It is through rocky crags. It is through everything.
You go into the prison, man. Yeah, that's the cool part. You actually go in Brushy Mountain Prison. You go through the same tunnel that James Earl Ray supposedly escaped through.
Speaking of that, so the founder, Gary Lazarus Lake, he heard about the man who assassinated JFK.
No, Martin Luther King.
Or Martin Luther King, not JFK, sorry.
Lee Harvey Oswald never made it.
No, Lee Harvey did not. It was some letters put together.
It's a true honor to see your brain work.
MLK, JFK. I was so close. Yeah. But he escaped, and they caught him, I believe, 8 miles away.
Yeah,
and Gary thought
2.5 days.
Yeah,
that was 3 days. Got the time.
And Gary thought, "Fuck that! I can make it a lot longer than he can. I bet I could do 100 miles." Gary has never completed this race.
Yeah, he's a really accomplished runner though on his own.
Oh yeah, no, he's more than accomplished, and I'm not trying to take anything from him.
He's also a chain smoker, which I really hard time acclimating the two.
He literally just less than 5 years ago walked from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States.
I remember that.
and
Pulled a Forrest Gump, huh?
Well, he was talking about that on one
That
of
is
those
amazing.
documentaries.
Yeah.
They were talking about, what do you think about Gary? Oh, Gary, he's just finishing up basically like this slow jog walk from fucking California all the way to the East Coast, which is good God.
Was that
dude.
3,000 miles
Something
or so?
like that, probably a little bit more. It's a long way, dude.
3,400 probably.
A long way.
That is a long way. So, Brian, this
Yo.
is kind of your deal. So we're going to let you jump into it with John and take it away. How's that sound?
Can't wait, man.
All right. Well, we're going to bring John on.
All right, well, hey, John. Wow, thanks for coming on. I really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on. So I had a few questions for you. Have you get ready for some questions, John?
Yeah.
I'll make them as random and inconsequential as possible.
So to give you some background, we have already done an intro because we wanted to just kind of optimize our time with you. So just going right in.
Yeah, so we probably won't just it'll we're going to cover a little bit of ground here and not just stick with one thing. So, what I wanted, I know that I know you were a runner in high school. I don't know if college maybe too. High school track cross country.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also read that you took a pretty long break, 10-ish years after school until you came back to running.
The only running I did in college was we had to take 2 PE classes, and I took run conditioning. And on the first day of the class, the professor said, the final exam is a 10K. If you beat me in the 10K, you get an automatic A.
Oh, nice.
So I asked him what his time was, and then I never came back.
What was his time?
I can't remember, upper 30s somewhere.
Oh, that's moving. So really my question that starts is what brought you back, not really what brought you back later in life, but what inspired you to do races, distances, and grueling races that were way past what you had done in school?
Well, I'd always wanted to see what I could do in the longer distances. Excelled more the longer things got in high school, but things never got longer than 5K.
Yeah.
That was the ceiling. So as I was finishing grad school, and I guess I was like 28 years old. It's like, man, I'm getting old. If I'm going to do this, I need to go ahead and do it and see what I can do. And now here I am, 40. I'm like, I'm just getting started. I'm still young. So it kind of snowballed from that. From that signing up from that first marathon, kind of on the spot. Went absolutely horribly. Didn't train properly at all, but just kept coming back with, I think I can do a little bit better than that. I think I can go a little farther. And before you know it, I've just kind of found myself in triathlon and ultras and all sorts of crazy things.
Yeah, it's an interesting arc. Even just going from a marathon to doing these the grueling ultra events is it's a little. It takes a mentality, I guess. It's a little bit vinegar. It's a little bit different. Yeah, it's what me and Kenzie, we call it type 2 fun. Yeah. It's a little.
Oh yeah, that's a very popular term in ultra running.
Oh, is it really?
Oh yeah.
Oh damn! All right. I had barely heard it, and I thought it was pretty local to the paddling community.
Yeah, Kenzie is a multiple time finisher of a river race that we do in Missouri called the MR 340, which is it's pretty long, 340 miles. You get, what is it, 80 hours that you get to finish it, and it's type 2 fun.
A lot less elevation change, just to clarify.
All right, so I'm gonna just kind of go. We have a few kind of Barkley centric questions because I'm fascinated with the phenomenon, but I don't want to spend all our time. I don't want to spend all the time talking about just that, even though it's very interesting to me. It's known as one of the most challenging ultra races in the world. Interesting format, the long loops, the elevation, the navigation challenges at times. Have you ever seen a race or event that's harder than that one?
Well, that all depends on your definition of hard. It's definitely mentally challenging. From what you actually have to do out there to just all the kind of mind games he plays with you, with not knowing when you're going to start until an hour before, and things like that. There are other races I've done that, it's like the Spine race, which I actually have coming up in about a month. It's in January across England, midwinter, where everything's soaking wet. You have like 8 hours of daylight per day. Wow. It's 260 miles, and I usually tell people that the Barkley holds you closer to the fire, but Spine holds you there for longer. So it's a very different experience. But in terms of a race that's actually possible, if you measure difficulty by percent of people that finish it, then yeah, I guess it's at the top.
And so you kind of brought up the next question I have, and I mean, this is probably another hard one to answer, but when you're competing in a race like the Barkleys, and we talked about this a little bit beforehand, where you would finish the 340, and I think it's like when you can finish it, it makes it a little bit easier. So it takes a little bit of the mental and a little bit of the physical out of it. When you're running a race like the Barkleys, what challenges you more, the mental side or the physical side?
One of the biggest issues for me is just always the sleep deprivation, and some people seem to deal with it better. Some people just, they deal with hallucinations or not thinking straight. I'd love to just have hallucinations. My issue is I flat out cannot stay awake. Like I will fall asleep while I'm moving, and there's nothing I can really do about it. And it's the toughest thing for me to battle through, and at this point, it's really the only time that I'm genuinely miserable in these things. I'm actually, type 1 fun, enjoying myself most of the time, except when I'm having trouble staying awake.
Yeah.
Would you classify the sleep deprivation as physical or mental?
It's a great question.
When you said you just can't stay awake, that's what triggered in my brain right away. Is that physical or is that mental? I don't even understand what you went with.
I've always thought of it as mental, but I've certainly tried very tangible physical things to try to deal with this, such as well-timed caffeine, which generally doesn't help anymore really late into a race. So yeah, I mean, it's not really something that seems like, at least in my experience so far, that I can just mentally push through. Maybe I just haven't found the secret to it yet, though.
So another quick question. Our friend Aaron here, he's quite an athlete. I don't know if I'd say he tried it. He did an ultra.
I attempted one.
Gave it a really good try. It's all right. Try it. You got to get off your butt and try it, right? Yeah. He's also a heavy trainer, workout guy, fitness guy, and he really wanted to know, when you're training for a race like this, do you mix in strength training, weights at all, or is it really just time on your feet, just miles?
I need to do more of that, especially as I do start to get older. It's not something to this point that, to be honest, it's just that I haven't had the time for it, rather than I don't see any potential benefit. I'm not yet really hitting the point of diminishing returns just on running. So for me, it's kind of, run enough until you hit that diminishing point of returns, and then start using your free time for strength training and cross training and anything else available to you.
Sure. What about recovery post race, or even just during your training? What types of protocols do you go to?
After a big race, I've generally got a week of no running and eating everything.
Right. Just a week. Just a week.
I ease back into it from there.
Yeah.
Catching up on sleep and that mental recovery is generally a bit tougher, to be honest. It's not like most people think, where you just kind of finish and then you pass out and sleep for 2 days. Your body's still keyed up on adrenaline, everything's aching,
Right.
And you've got life to get back to.
Mm-hmm.
During training, a big part of it is just being sure that I'm fueling properly, both during and immediately following my tough workouts and my long runs. Trying to get enough sleep, which that's another thing that I wish that I really need to try to make some more time for. But I'd say those are the two main things.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Well, you mentioned the sleep deprivation. I saw on the internet there was a story about you falling asleep in a a groove full of water to try to stay awake. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was last year at Barkley 2023, and he gives us these cheap $10 watches from Walmart, just to be sure that no one has one with GPS or altimeter or anything else that isn't permitted at the race. And the one that I got, just so happened the alarm on it didn't work. So I didn't want to take a nap and wake up 10 hours later when the race is over. So I was, this is a strategy that's worked well for me in the past. I was looking for a very uncomfortable place to sleep so that after a while my body would naturally wake itself up. It would decide that laying there in that tire rut was more miserable than not sleeping. But as I was doing that, just a few minutes, I looked up and saw this guy and his wife and 2 kids approaching, and just zero hesitation on my part. I said, "Oh, hey Kit, how are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm good. That's a John Kelly nap if I've ever seen one." And I mumbled something about Barkley and needing to finish the last loop. And after the race, I was like, man, so this is where I was convinced that I had actually had a hallucination, because I was like, man, this guy, he was one of my childhood friends. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. So like, what are the odds that he would be out there in the middle of the woods? I would immediately recognize him. And then he would just continue on like everything is fine with the guy lying face down in the tire tracks. And it was real. It was really him. I was convinced that it must have been just my imagination, but he was out there with his family.
That's crazy.
Sounds like a type 2 fun strategy.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a question. The race has been going on for 38 years, and there's only been 20 finishers. What made this year so special that 5 people were able to finish?
It's really a combination of things. One, it was great conditions. It was a great starting time. There were a lot of strong veterans out there who know the course really well. Jared Campbell and myself were both out there who, between us, we account for something like a quarter of all Barkley finishes. And the groups there were two main groups, and they were split up with him in one and me in the other. And then also you have this effect where people are out there attempting Barkley, and they're gaining skills, they're gaining experience, they're gaining knowledge, and a lot of times that will happen in a year with terrible conditions or other things that go wrong that prevent a finish. But then you kind of get this pile up of people that have gained that experience and gained that ability to finish, and they're just piled up waiting for the right year, for the right conditions. And when that happens, then boom, all those people who are ready and have put in the time, they make it to the finish. We saw that with Jasmine this year. It was her third attempt. Greg was, I don't know how many attempts. It was maybe his third, maybe more than that. And then we had Ihor out there who, he finished on his first attempt, and he was just a machine. But that does happen sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I got one more personally from me. So each loop is roughly about a mile elevation change, and you only need to go less than a 2 mile per hour pace. So to everybody out there, that sounds like a really easy accomplishment to complete. But explain a little bit about the terrain and why only 20 people have finished in almost 40 years.
Yeah, the elevation per loop is about 13. I think it was 13.5 thousand last year.
It's like
So it's way more than we thought.
Close to 3 miles, about 2.5.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But so that's a huge part of it, and it is just constant, relentless up and down. There are a few stretches where it's runnable, and when it is, you very much have to take advantage of that and run. But it's mostly off trail. It's unmarked, and the terrain is incredibly technical with leaves and rocks and roots and mud and briars, and you're out there in these dense woods, and everything looks the same.
Yeah.
There's no long points of reference that you can look for. It's just trees, and it's very difficult to, especially when conditions get bad, when it's dark or foggy. It's very difficult to continue moving forward at a good pace without risking making a fatal mistake and wandering off course.
Are you have to collect the pages from the books, which we brought up in our intro. How hard are those books to find? Are they pretty hidden, or are they?
Generally, there's somewhere around 13 to 15 books, and probably 3 or 4 of them are in new locations each year. So a large part of the course is recycled year to year, and he changes part of it. And so those new ones can sometimes be tricky. And that's where on the first loop, it's useful to kind of stay in a large group and to be able to fan out and find those new books. And once you found it once, it's generally pretty easy. You should know. But there was one book in particular this year that was stuffed in the bottom of this hollowed out tree, and we got there and it was dark, and just a number of us looked at that very tree and looked in the hole and didn't see anything. And it was actually Greg, who I mentioned a minute ago, who found it in there after a wide search by everyone else, and reached his long arm down in to get it. And it's not really intentionally like that, to where they're not intentionally trying to make people lose time finding the books, but there's actually now a pretty bad feral hog problem out there. And if the books are sitting out somewhere that they're easily accessible, then the hogs will eat the books.
Just another danger of the course at Barkley.
It'd be a hell of a way to lose a race.
Holy smokes, man.
So, John, with the change in the course over the years, but also being a 3-time finisher, I have my own account from the race that I've done twice, successfully, that is, and I'm curious, what's the delta in your training over the years with regard to mental versus physical, and are you doing an increased regimen each year now that you know every year you get older, but you also get wiser to the race and you get better with wisdom, so to speak, and navigation, etc. But what's your change in training over the years?
Well, I have a lot more confidence in what I'm doing, and that comes from having been there before, also working with the coach now. And with that, there is a great deal more efficiency. So training volume maybe is roughly similar. I'm not doing quite as many big vert weeks that I originally did, because when I first got in, I had no idea what I was doing. And it's just, oh crap, I'm in the Barkley. What do? I need to find a hill, find all the hills, run up all the hills. And so that's what I spent months doing, just trying to stack up as much vert in my training as I could, driving to big hills because I lived outside of DC where it's pretty flat, and that was extremely time consuming and just not a very optimal thing. Now that I have 4 kids, it's definitely not something that I could even do if I wanted to. So I have a much more streamlined process, and the vert focus, it really comes in the last month or so, maybe starting 6 weeks out instead of 4 months out.
Fair. I've also got another one. This one's meant to learn the John that I'm talking to, if you will, from a distance. As someone who's finished what I consider to be a pretty grueling race, and I also look at what you do, and I think mine is petty compared to yours. I want to know the difference in your brain in 2016 when you saw, or 2017 when you finished and you saw Gary come in 6 seconds after the mark with all of the required papers but the wrong turn, versus Jasmine coming in 30 seconds before. And I want to preface this with, I watched a video of you at both of these, and ironically, you've run 60 hours, 100 plus miles, but your legs work as soon as you're ready to congratulate or be there for a comrade or an enemy or a competitor or whatever you consider these people, the ginger runner.
Yeah, and so I did an interview recently where I said the 30 seconds thing, and I screwed that up. She had 99 seconds to spare.
Oh,
the whole 90.
Thank you. Thank you.
And 60-hour race. But yeah, I mean, those two experiences, I mean, just complete opposite ends of the spectrum in every way, both in terms of result and expectations. When I finished in 2017, and there's video, and I sit down, and the first thing I say is, "Oh, where's Gary?" And a lot of people say, "Look at him, he's so concerned about Gary. That's so great." And to be honest, like, I was just wondering where he was. Like, I figured he had either finished or he would be finishing soon. Like, there wasn't even this thought in my mind of, "Oh, Gary might not finish." And so I just sat down and expected him. He had 30 minutes, and I thought, okay, well, I'll just sit here and he'll show up any minute now and finish. And then, of course, he didn't. He took a wrong turn at the very end, unfortunately, and just missed it. And Jasmine, on the other hand, we're all sitting there and just, I mean, I had seen her on the 5th loop, and I had done the math from because we were going opposite directions. So I'd done the math from where we crossed, and I was like, it's going to be tough. Then I got reports from where she had gone by the fire tower, and I was like, yeah, that's not looking good. And as the minutes tick by, like, everyone there really is just, okay, well, tough luck. Hopefully next year she's not going to make it. And then there she is. And it's just such an incredible thing to see that. And, you think 99 seconds in a 60-hour race. I mean, that's like 1.5 seconds per hour. If she had taken an extra 1.5 seconds per hour, you get that shot of adrenaline. You get back up and do what you can. And that's also, to be honest, one of the frustrating things for me, that I spend most of that last loop trying to stay awake. And then once I finish, it's like, okay, I'm wired. I'm good. Wide awake at that point.
I got one last one for you before the, and I'll let Brian jump back in. You're fucking brilliant. You have a PhD in electrical engineering. Did you have to get smart so that you could fund this crazy expensive hobby of yours? Because I know the feeling to an extent. I'm way broker. It's way cheaper to just get a kayak, but curious.
I mean, one thing that my job has afforded me is flexibility. So I helped found a startup about 8 years ago, which was a ridiculous volume of work, but work that could be kind of shifted around. so that when I do have one of these crazy events, I'm able to make that time to be able and go do it. It has also certainly helped I have sponsors, but I don't have to rely on those sponsors the way that some athletes that are trying to compete at an elite level in this sport do. So that again gives me flexibility and freedom in what I do. I don't really have to worry about doing the things that might produce some income. I can do the things that I enjoy, do the things that I'm passionate about, and that is a huge thing to enable me to keep going, really. Because if I were out there doing things just to try to please a sponsor or whatever, like, I don't think that would. I think I would burn out rather quickly doing that.
I get it. Very cool. Very cool.
All right, John. So we're about running out of your time. I really appreciate you coming. I wanted to wrap it up. A couple quick things. I also have kids. 2 kids. 7-year-old son, 14-year-old daughter. And a little background, just really quick. I don't have to tell a story, but running something that kind of saved my life. First 30 years of my life, I was sedentary, lazy, unmotivated. And you know what? It's one of those things where I really was the guy who said, you'll never see me running anything like a 5K or a 10K or half. I just won't do it. I'm not built that way. If you chase me, I will run. But I won't be going far. I was a little bit bigger, lost about 75, 80 pounds, just committing to running. Okay. Just doing it because it took the willpower. And once I got a little taste of being able to do it, I stuck with it. And it's just been something that's been a big part of my life. And and Aaron next to me, he's the one who introduced me to the Barkleys in this whole concept. And I just, again, you're really one of my inspirations as far as running goes. It's wild to see what a human being can do when they have appropriate motivation, willpower, and discipline. But real quick, so you have 4 kids. How old is your oldest? How old are your kids?
10 8-year-old twins and 4.
Perfect. So at least do the kids run with you?
Sometimes they'll maybe do the beginning or end of a run with me. 2 of them enjoy running, the third not so much, and the 4th is too early to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter tried, didn't care for it so much. But my son, my 7-year-old, he did actually, he just ran his first 5K with me about 3 weeks ago, and he finished it without walking. So he did walk once to get a drink of water, which, again, drinking water when you're running can be it can be kind of a messy ordeal. But so along the lines of those, the wear and tear that takes place when you're doing these long runs. Would it be something that you would encourage your kids to do if they wanted to do as they got older?
Well, and first, just congrats to you and your son on his 5K. I mean, it's quite the journey that you've had, and amazing to have been able to come that far and stick with this. I do tell people, you mentioned that those distances, I often say a half marathon is the longest reasonable distance to run. Those are great things to stick to. As far as my kids go, they're still at the point where I'm encouraging them to try as many things as they can, find what they're passionate about. If that happens to be running, then great. If it's something else, then that's great too. My big thing for them isn't, I don't want them to look at me and say, "Oh, Dad was a great runner. I should do that." I want them to look at me and see that I had something that I was passionate about, and I set big goals and went out there and wasn't scared of big challenges or failure, and I just went at it and pursued it with everything that I had. And for them, whether that's running or a different activity, then maybe not even athletic related at all, then that's great. I just to find something that does that for them.
Great. Just teach them to be passionate, man. That's all we can do. It's the best thing we can do. All right, I've got one closer question. I kind of go with a little cliche question, but I like these cliche questions because they kind of make you think a little bit. So, you've run a majority of your life, not always ultras, but you've been competitive in running for a long time. If you could sum up what running has brought to your life in one word or one phrase, what would that be? Oh, scratching his head. That's good.
Yeah. So, one word.
Could be a phrase. I don't want to limit it to a word. You can use a phrase.
Let's go with growth.
Yeah.
It's something that has taught me that I can continue to improve and grow in anything that I do and anything that I really put my time and my heart into.
That's a great answer. That was pretty good. I like it.
I got one for you from a question from a teacher, if this is acceptable.
Sure. Go ahead.
He went with an ultra running. He's actually the 12-hour Skyline Scramble record holder right now. It's a friend of mine. His name's Spencer. And he wanted to know, from an elementary school PE teacher, father, ultra runner, to you, ultra runner, father, etc. What takeaways would you give him to try to put forth to children at that age?
The biggest one is just not being scared of failure. To teach kids that it's okay to go after big things, and it's okay to come up short. And those big things, oftentimes, that's the quickest path to ultimate success, or at least to learning. I think so much of kind of how kids are often taught is, you have to succeed, you have to get the good grade, you have to pass, you have to hit this time or whatever. To me, if I'm constantly succeeding at everything, that I'm not trying hard, I'm not trying enough difficult things. And that's something I think it's really early. It's really great for kids to learn early is just that mindset of going for big things and the mental strength to know what to do if you come up short.
Absolutely. I think that goes right back to what you said with your one word answer and growth. Without failure, I mean, there's no growth. You have to fail.
Stagnate, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
And we're gonna close out because we reached the end of our time. John, I appreciate it. But to circle one really quick thing is that we just want you to know that we're very thankful because we are currently, as we're new podcasters, we haven't been doing it long, and we're failing and we're succeeding and everything in between all the time, and we're always learning new things that we need to do better. And we're rough on each other at times. We're growing. We're honest. We know where we're making mistakes, and we want to get better. And your answers at the end couldn't have summed it up better. I don't think it could have been done.
John, absolutely. Thank you for your time personally.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much. Enjoyed the chat, and all the best to you. I hope your podcast really has that growth, and you're able to keep going from here.
Thank you, and good luck going forward.
We'll send you links, buddy.